We have Beryl Hawkins and Barry
Natusch.
Natusch. Okay, so please give them a hand.
Yeah, we're going to need about a minute or two just to
Okay, sure.
see the technology here. We've got speakers and we've got light
Okay.
switches outside, is it?
Yes,
Okay,
Like
we
the lights
need to
off.
turn it off and on again briefly during
Okay.
that.
You got it, okay.
The raspberry?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could, yeah.
Which one?
Okay, first of all, let's do it.
There's
So we have about a minute to test it.
Okay, sure.
This one.
Yeah. I've got the speakers here. Let's just go through and check that we got sound. Thank you.
Okay. Can't have a movie without sound, right?
Stop not great. Is there any volume on these things?
I think it's okay.
Okay. Is there a volume on it, do you know?
These ones,
It's fixed.
maybe not sure. Yeah, these aren't the ones I usually
Put them all the
use.
way up on the computer. so
All right.
that's
All
okay.
right. Okay, well, now do we want to start with what's
just-
off or on?
All the time.
Can you see us?
Yes.
Yes.
Usually we ask, can you hear us? But in this case, can you see us? Okay, a brief introduction, and Beryl comes from, Beryl Hawkins in Temple University, Japan. She also works at my school at Nihon University. She's been a journalist in her past life. She has a present life in which she's a media researcher.
And this is Barry Natusch, and he's also a media researcher as well. He already mentioned the university, but he's a professor at Nihon University. And he's also a linguist as well.
Okay. All right. Would you like this bit?
Not yet, not yet.
No, okay. Sorry, we're still coming to grips with the technology here. I think it'll work for us. Or maybe this one doesn't. No, it'll go with the computer. Okay. Okay. So
Okay,
what-
I was here at the Temple of Dendor. This is at the Met. And this was around the mid-1980s, a cocktail reception. And I think at that point, I knew that museums are not just for housing artifacts, that museums and the role of museums are changing and evolving. And Barry, you want to talk about how you got interested in this topic?
Okay, well, I've always been interested in museums, but recently I saw a film, I think you know it, Night at the Museum. And at the beginning of this film, there's a curator who rushes into the lobby of the museum, very irate at a school party passing through. And he says, "Don't touch the exhibits. Don't you know what a museum is for?" And then he berates the teacher who's taking the students through too, and he says, "Control your young." And this kind of introduces our key point about museums today. Now this is our movie, and we would like you just to sort of see it because it will explain what we mean by passive visiting of museums and participatory visiting of museums. So we have a study, which is basically a pilot study of museums in the United States and in Japan. We're comparing particularly the role that education plays in those museums. Yeah, thanks. Technology is a big part of modern museums. It's always been in museums, of course. Nothing new in technology in museums. It's always been there in terms of distributing the information. But we've seen there's a bit of a change in museums. iPads are now distributed to not only the visitors of the museums, but also guides are carrying them around. And so they're becoming very much a part of technology. Visitors to the museums are now, of course, free to select the pathway that they follow through the museum. And they do this by a number of ways. Simulators have been in museums for quite a while now, and they're becoming increasingly sophisticated, from the kind that are simply theme park rides to something which is a little more challenging, like the Enigma code machine. Performance is a feature of that many participating performance is a part of museums, and we've seen that two kinds there: personal kind of performance and public performance on the right there. So museum identities are changing because of this shift from passivity to participatory. Kenneth Hudson says nothing automatically right about the Western kind of museum, and this has led on to a bit of a museum identity dilemma. So not only are they now just preserving artifacts, but they're providing places for shopping, eating, and participation, and so that they're becoming places where people can use them almost for anything, by anyone, anytime. This museum identity shift, therefore, has resulted in museums becoming don't forget that one too. Anti-elitist organizations, so that they're moving out so that ordinary people can enjoy them. They're sometimes very disturbing places to visit. For example, if you have some exhibitions which are against public, offend public taste, that occurs. And these are a few of the scholars.
Yeah, so these are some of the scholars that Barry has just referred to, some of the ones that we used in putting together this study. Oh, I'm hitting the right button. There we go. So museum curators, the key word is change. Their role is changing. Prior, they were concerned with curating exhibits, also concerned with the renovations inside and outside the museum. Now, their job profile is really expanded. So they are also diplomats, economists, critics, historians, politicians, promoters, and probably a few more as well. So they wear many hats now. And in addition to that, they're like the modern day Robin Hood. They are taking art from the millionaire collectors and putting them into the galleries. These are some of the leaders in the art world. We see that the gender shift. A stronger female presence. Also, museum curators are becoming more postmodern in their approach as well. Postmodernism in art, has a plus and a minus side. This is the plus side, leotard. Really a shattering of beliefs, in terms of what we know as established notions of art. And then on the minus side, we have Baudrillard, who quite emphatically argues that contemporary art is worthless. It is a non-exhibition of non-works and non-galleries, which equals a non-event.
We have a little question for you to participate in here. The dog. It's a dog. Does it react? What's your reaction? Do you go, wow, huh? Or do you tend to go, huh? Oh, wow. Maybe we can ask you if you have any sort of idea of how you react to this Metal Dog by Jeff Koons.
Lloyd.
Wow. Oh.
Okay. Lloyd, I'm with you on that.
Okay. Can we have a couple more?
Huh?
Spontaneous reactions.
Huh?
Just huh.
Huh.
Nothing else. Okay, then.
And then,
Here we go, here's another one. That's not even on the screen.
What was yours? Yours.
Huh?
Stop there.
I'm with you on that one. Okay, actually, I changed it when I saw this figure to wow, $58.4 million. You have a question for me about this, I remember.
Would you pay $58.4 million for that dog?
Okay, perhaps if I were Bill Gates or Oprah Winfrey, I might consider it. I would probably have to talk to my financial advisors though.
And in my case, I'd have to talk to my art advisor before I invested in something like this.
Any other comments? Okay, lean pockets perhaps. Leaner pockets as well prevail, yes. And at the same time, we have skyrocketing gifts to museums, $1.1 billion from the Estee Lauder cosmetics firm, Leonard Lauder, and another concern with funding, of course, it's critical, is
Right. Museums have
Architecture.
always cost money, even in the past and in the future too. But of course, the architecture's undergone a fundamental shift, and this is reflected in their functions and what they're used for. Even in the interiors now, you're seeing quite a lot of change now in the way that the architecture of interior of museums is changing. In the Guggenheim Museum, Art Museum in New York, you walk up a spiral walkway to the top, watching the exhibits on the way up. But you do have the option of taking the elevator up to the top and walking down too.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I need an honest answer. Did you walk up the spiral staircase and walk down?
I've been there 3 times now, and each time I've taken the elevator up and seen the exhibition in reverse coming down.
Oh, I see. Let's justify that.
And there's the Hirshhorn in Washington, D.C., which actually makes use of its installation, a modern art installation, to decorate the lobby, which has a very disturbing, nauseous kind of effect on you when you're trying to use an elevator. I nearly fell off it.
Yeah.
Museums and education, though. What is the connection between museums and education? First, we touched upon experiential learning, and that's where ours probably links with your presentation a little bit. John Dewey emphasized the role of experience in education.
Also, we were talking about the Greeks originally. The Greeks saw museums as learning.
Well, museum means learning in Greek.
In
It's
Greek.
where it comes from. And so, yes, so that's the original idea of a museum was a learning institution for the Greeks, and now we're just sort of, the wheel's coming full circle, and we're going back to museums as places of learning. So what kind of learning takes place then? It's probably useful at this point to point out the distinction between formal, non-formal, and informal kinds of learning. Not quite, what was your term again?
Service learning?
Service learning. It's not quite in that area, but it's sort of in a parallel universe, so to speak. We particularly would point out here the difference between informal and non-formal and informal learning. This is where you're learning something in other classes, and in informal learning, you're learning something from your friends and from other places like the internet. So what's happened then in museums has been a kind of a big bang as we've seen the shift from passive to participatory. A lot of this influence comes from business. So you find companies like this, to pick up a couple of examples here. TripAdvisor, for example, gives advice from people who've been to hotels and places to other visitors. And in museums, you're finding that too. Museum websites adopt a kind of TripAdvisor model. Things like games, computer games, influencing what the kind of activities that are in museums. You've got avatars, adventure games, seeking out prizes in the museum pathways. The way that we access museums too is changing with the advent of the hardware we use. The iPads we saw before. Cooper Hewitt Museum uses the concept of a pen, the pen, which you touch on artifacts as you walk around. Then it beams the information back to your email address, so you can pick up information about the artifacts that you've looked at. Things like QR codes also, apps which are downloadable and serve as your auditory guide as you walk around the museum. Involvement also is becoming increasingly popular in museums. We've got things like photography, where people are invited to use their cameras now, instead of, like in many Japanese museums, are being told to put them away. Selfies which you put up in the museum in Washington, you've got your picture is taken, your picture goes up, and there's a continuing flow of images of other people in the museum. Joint ventures in business, of course, take place between companies. Museums are linking with schools in order to join together in their various enterprises.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about joint ventures between schools and museums in just a minute. But following up on the model that we just showed you, we visited museums in the US and in Japan, and we conducted a pilot study, sent out questionnaires, and these are the museums in the States that we culled data from, and these are the museums here in Japan. And this is some of the data that we collected from the curatorial section. Just a couple of results I want to focus on. The second one, encourage visitors to come up with their interpretations of the exhibits. This is what we found. The US museums seem to have more of that. Also, the last one as well, encouraging more photography in US museums as compared to the Japanese museums. For example, at Lakeland in LA, I went to a German Expressionist exhibit, and underneath each painting was a little plaque indicating whether you could use your iPhone or a camera. And then, of course, in many of the Japanese, like for example, we went to Yokohama, there was just one poster saying no photography at all in comparison. And Barry will share a little bit from this is the data from our educational section.
Just in brief then, what's happening in education? Let's just compare United States museums with Japanese museums. Typically a big United States museum will have something like 25 to 30 full-time education officers, and a Japanese museum will have like 2 or 3 part-timers is in the same proportions. Right.
Okay, so these are some examples of really innovative programs that are going on in museums now. I'm just going to refer to a couple of them. This one, an online video chat at the Met, where you can actually go online and chat with art scholars. The first one is an interactive art adventure game at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. Also, I want to mention this one as well. This is the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. They have a joint event between artists, hip-hop artists, and art scholars. And all of this really comes down to what we call intermediality, blurring the lines between art and media. So let me just refer to the last comment here. Terry Smith talks about, and really argues that intermediality is a key component of contemporary art. And these are some examples of intermediality.
No, never mind. Carry on.
That's at the museum.
That's at the Natural History Museum.
Right, and you see it's quite an interactive 3D. We just don't have time to show that one. Okay, just in conclusion, a couple of points. The cultural transformation in museums has been precipitated really in part by museum visitors. That's us as well. And they have really pushed museums to become more postmodern, intermediate, and entertaining. Also, we think about museum curators. As I said before, change is the key to survival. They serve multiple roles. And the last point, I came up with this metaphor for curators, calling them concert maestros, orchestrating, conducting change in our larger cultural ecosystem.
And our second conclusion is the educational one, that museum educators, their role is informed by technology, that they know their visitors, they know technology, and they are intermediarists themselves.
And our final thoughts. This is from the eminent museum scholar, Stephen Weil, and I'm only going to give you 2 words. Museums matter.
Because they're the cultural guardians of our past and our present and our future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, speakers. I guess we have some time. I guess we'll see how we can do this. Maybe it's fine for you guys to sit over here, or I don't know what's more intimate. Maybe this row right here, so the speakers can come here. You guys can sort of direct your chairs this way.
We're on the spot.
Yeah, you're on the spot. Yeah, I think that's a nice.
Now it's the panel.
Yeah, now it's a real panel.
It almost feels somewhat complicated.
So if you have a question, please just say the name of the person you'd like to address the question to, and please go at it.
To the Natusch Hawkins team,
Yeah.
why is photography still banned in museums in Japan?
We find that almost everywhere we go, that the Japanese museums are very guarded about use of photography. They do distinguish between places you can take pictures and where you can't take pictures. Sometimes it's because they've got overseas exhibitions coming in and they're very careful not to offend by allowing images to escape. So if you've got something coming, say, from the Boston Museum of Art, you probably find it very difficult for a Japanese museum to allow you to take pictures of something coming from outside. So to some extent, it's respect shown to the foreign exhibits.
Why is selfie sticks being banned? Go ahead.
You can go ahead. That's sort of a follow-up on what you.
That was why is selfie sticks being banned at some museums?
I think they could possibly destroy,
Yeah.
the exhibits. Yeah.
Poke them through a picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that just happened last year.
Yeah.
Right, just last year they
Yes.
started to ban them.
Yeah, the Louvre.
Yeah. They are a potential weapon, just as you go onto an airline flight. And certain things are banned because of their potentiality for being a weapon. Selfie sticks are too.
They're banned
Also
at
for
Disneyland too.
Oh, really?
Here, because my friend's a director there, and they completely banned them at Disneyland in Japan.
That's interesting to know. Also at Mori Art Museum in Roppongi, you can't use a pen,
Right.
and they will issue you these tiny pencils. And that's the only thing you can use. And if they see a pen come out of your bag, they're on you, the staff, quickly.
But this also was true in the United States when I was visiting there about 5 years ago. And at Cooper Hewitt, the Cooper Hewitt that I visited, and I was sketching, because I know photography then that was 5 years ago. So I was busy sketching and the guard came up to me, put your pen away. And I said, can I use a pencil? No, that's no good either. So they were very down on any replication of images. But suddenly in these 5 years, we've seen this sudden switch to allowing at least sketching and even photography. Japan is just behind the curve, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, because I know at museums like the Art Institute of Chicago, you can take pictures. The one thing they don't allow is flash.
Yeah.
Because flash can, of course, damage images, and they don't like flash.
Yeah. I think that's a fair.
I found interesting at LACMA, some of the paintings you could use your iPhone, and some of them you could only use your, you could only use your iPhone, you couldn't use your camera, others you could use your camera. It was so confusing. And I wondered why each painting had a specific,
Do you have some questions for the other speakers?
I guess I have a general question. So, this last presentation was a lot about new technologies in the museum, which seems to appeal to younger generations, right? But if we think about aging generations, that of course more and more aging people are becoming better versed in technology. But is there a risk of alienating certain populations of people with new technologies as you're trying to make it appealing to a younger generation.
Well, the demographics of museum visitors, which we received from the Smithsonian Group, it suggested that the number of museums in the younger age bracket are certainly outweighing those in the older generation. And so they're targeting the younger generation, partly because that's where the demographic is, and partly because, of course, they're going to feed through the generations and be visitors in the future too. So that's one bit of coming from the data that we've got.
Are there financial implications associated with targeting a certain segment?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because some of the museums the smaller ones are really in financial trouble. And if they don't find these innovative ways to bring in more people, they will definitely shut down.
Hence the looking at the business models in order to bring them into running museums too.
Any other questions for the other presentation, comments?
I actually have one question for each group. In Gunma, where is the Hansen's disease?
It's a new museum from the last year. It's in Kusatsu.
Kusatsu.
Like it's high in the mountains, in the summer mountains. It's very high. They were absolutely isolated. They were supposed to stay
I
away
think
from
you're from Guma, right?
Right.
You're living in Guma.
Well, both by this time.
Yeah.
You
Right.
nailed the essential point.
Right.
Both by this time, and yet I had never heard of it. So thank you. That's very, very interesting.
The museum is fantastic, and it was built not by architects, by local carpenters. But the atmosphere is amazing.
Did not know about it. Thank you very much. And I had a question about interpretation, and with simultaneous interpretation, on the spot, is there a sort of professional standard for how long you can do it in a day? It's such a
In the class, we focus on consecutive interpretation.
Yeah.
We touch a little bit on simultaneous. I've heard
anything in any definition as well.
I believe the UN sets it at a maximum of 20 or 30 minutes. Usually simultaneous interpreters professionally work in pairs because your brain will just overload and start to ooze.
Right.
And you just can't keep that much attention at one time. Simultaneous, I believe the maximum is 30. I believe it's 30 minutes.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you.
There's actually a very interesting
Yeah.
video on YouTube of a lady named Morimoto. I think it's Yuki Morimoto. And she's the personal interpreter for, I can't remember what his name is. I believe he's the CEO of Toyota now. But she talks about for about 8 minutes her life as a simultaneous interpreter and all the challenges and the rewards that go into it. It's very interesting.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You just saved someone's life.
About 3 minutes, about 3 minutes.
Just one second, we're passing out, as you did in your
Yes.
workshop, we're passing out links to some of the innovative programs
Thank
that
you.
were up on the slide, and actually quite a few others as well.
Thank you. I was wondering if you'd traveled to Naoshima.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I had a question for the Hansen Guild. Are there other museums in Japan? Because in the Sekonaika, they also had some Hansen Guild facilities too.
Thank you. Yes, they have basically in every prefecture, but this is a special museum in Kusatsu because it was a prison for disobedient patients. So they excavated from Tokyo Kansas in this museum. The main curator went there, he excavated, he's an archaeologist. So it was founded last year and we were invited to translate for them. It was by chance. But yes, they basically have different units, usually related to the sanatoria in different prefectures.
All right. we have to yield the room to
Okay.
other speakers. But of course, feel free to ask questions afterwards. Thank you so much, speakers. And I hope you guys go visit some of the other rooms and hear some of the other speakers as well. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
No,